Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you, wherever you are in the world. This is Eric Bush. I'm the CEO and proud to be your host of today's webinar. We at DD Tech are delighted to have Deborah Smith here presenting for us. This is the third in a series of webinars on the demand-driven operating model. And today's presentation is going to focus on how you take your DDOM and the process improvements and turn them into a competitive weapon for your business as you move forward. Before we get started with the webinar content, though, we'd like to just make a couple notes here. First of all, everyone will be on listen-only mode. We do that to protect the audio quality and ensure you have a real good experience and can hear everything on the session. Secondly, we will be recording the session, and a link will be made available to the participants so that you can review Deborah's material afterwards. And then we'll also distribute a PDF of her presentation material afterward as well. So without further, and the final key point is questions. Please use the question feature in your webinar control panel so that you can ask questions and we'll get those covered off by the end of the day. So I don't think she needs any further introduction. I think you've all been part of these previous webinars. Deborah is a noted author, thought leader in the whole demand-driven space, and we're really delighted to have her presenting this series for us. So with that, Deborah, over to you.
Helps to be off mute. Good morning. I'm here in beautiful downtown Reno, Nevada, and working on a new client called Server Technologies. So they are heading down the road of a new DDOM, so pretty excited about that. So let's get started. So I'm not going to spend any time. If you've been with us, you've seen this slide. If you're viewing this webinar out of sequence, you should go back to 1 and 2 because it won't make any sense. I've already been through this journey. But what I want to talk to you today is about cases. So we did the Corona case when we were talking about the problem with cost-centric measures and cost focus and how that fights with flow. And that is a case of DD&S&OP, and it is also about how cost drives you to make bad investment decisions. Today we're going to be focusing on 2 cases, one from Wall Clippers and one from Stem Cell Technology. Both have full DDOMs, and we're going to show you what they've been able to do by focusing on supply variation. When you have a DDOM, you can focus on the supply variation, and that's really where process improvement and your competitive weapons come from. Because together with DDMRP and R+ and DBR+ for scheduling and execution, I can make sense out of integration of all variation and buffers. So let's get started. Quick review. Demand-driven is going for 4 effects. And a demand-driven operating model has the top 3 embedded in them. You can't get to smart metrics without it. So DBR+ last week, and smart metrics and DD&S&OP this week. I know that you've seen this, and what I want to emphasize is that every level of a DDAE has a very specific thing that it's going after. And it's all about visibility. Visibility and Thoughtware determine an organization's ability to adapt and improve flow. So when we look at an adaptive demand-driven S&OP, we're really talking about a bridge. So it's what makes the relevant information bridge between flow metrics and cost metrics. And when I talk about cost, I'm not talking about standard unit cost. I'm talking about an expense, an investment, a cash outflow. So strategic direction is given by, let's say, top management. Plan parameters are put into, let's say, our advanced planning module. We make some decisions about if we're planning on a growth or a decline in business by a SKU, then we're going to adjust the model parameters so that we can meet that growth. And we're going to check it out on 2 levels. Do I have materials? Do I have capacity? And do I have the information? So if you're engineering driven or R&D driven, it's critical that engineering and R&D be tied into those model parameters. And we'll talk about that and show you some examples of that later. Once I have those model parameters from my demand-driven S&OP modeling team, they're responsible for delivering them to the execution team. So now my planners are actually planning their parts and scheduling the plan. Actual orders come in, then I operate. Once I operate, I am able to compare what I planned against what actually happened. And that's where DD&S&OP has 2 functions. The first function we saw was making sure the plan parameters fit what I need you to do for my future. The second is that reconciliation of what I plan to have happen and what did happen. That's what we call variance analysis on time, on quantity, and on spec. That means I can refresh my model parameters. That's a job that's done weekly and monthly. Then the demand-driven projections are taken back to my strategic modeling team that is interfacing with our executives. They're the people that are saying, here's what's really going on. And if you want what you want, and you want us to make that plan, here's what we're going to need. So that's how it's bridging those time frames. Those model parameters and the management are absolutely key, and it's bi-directional. Anybody who puts in model parameters and lets them sit is not going to have a robust model, and you're not going to improve because things decay over time. And that's the whole point of that visibility in smart metrics. So a demand-driven operating model is the foundation of a DDAE, and that visibility to flow-based information is what's critical. I can't get to smart metrics and I can't get to DDS&OP without it. It's the engine. So let's just take a quick look, and I know you've seen this all before, but remember what we're doing is we're designing a model, and that's where all the Thoughtware comes in. So this week we've been spending quite a bit of time with this company, really deep diving into how it has to work for them. There is no one model. There's no cookie cutter model. So by the time I get DDMRP up and DBR plus up, let's just say demand-driven scheduling and execution, I'm ready to move into DDOM tactical metrics and focus improvements in tactical reconciliation. Then I have to come back to Thoughtware, because once I've modeled, I'm going to be remodeling and remodeling. And if I can understand capacity, it links wholly and fully into the capability I have to protect materials. Okay? So let's just do a little deep dive today into DDOM. I can't emphasize enough that DDS&OP is where flow and cost bridge decisions. And it's this relevant range idea that is so critical and so misunderstood in, I'm going to say, 99% of the companies that I meet, and I think 99% of the companies in the globe. I run into companies that are actually asked to take measurements of every action, tactical action on the floor, and execution action at a resource level. And they're actually recording those. It makes no sense if it took 3 minutes or 5 minutes at that resource. What matters is, what am I getting through in terms of flow on the entire system? So until we can make that bridge and not be deep diving into labor to see if somebody is 3% off or 5% off, because labor is such a small amount of our expenses or our cost inside that materials, we aren't going to make any sense. So the whole point that I want you to understand is, I'm living here, operating daily to execute that plan. I need to live here and make certain that those model parameters stay fresh inside that time frame. But I also need to be looking at strategic relevant information so I know what kind of investments I have to make based on what I really can do and where we believe the market's going. And that's what that bridge is. So again, DDMRP acts as the engine to generate supply. Demand-driven scheduling actually takes our control points, finitely schedules those drums, and gives us a very good view of what kind of capacity, critical capacity considerations we have. And then we move into execution. Those model parameters have to be right, or they have to be good enough. They have to be good enough that we can actually go back, make some sense of them, and change. It's the remodeling that makes you smart. Actual demand comes in, work order priorities are passed from R plus, DDMRP, promise dates go back. If promise dates don't go back, we don't get alerts in the right order. That is execution. So in DDMRP, planning isn't enough. You also have to execute. If I get an alert, then I need to be aware that in that time frame, I'm going to be interfacing with the scheduler, because I need to make certain that the work order release and or the execution priority is updated so that we stay fresh in terms of being on time to the client or customer with the product that they need. So if I have a stock keeping level that I've promised someone that I'm going to be ensuring that they have, I need to be certain that those buffers don't die. So tactical reconciliation is taking those smart metrics, what happened in the day and the hour, in the week, in the month, and making the reconciliation back to those model parameters. It's also making a recommendation to your executive staff about how we're going to spend our money or what we should be doing, both in a tactical and a strategic time frame. So DDI has made a list of 6 elements that they consider DD-S&OP and has explained them. And if you look at them, these top 5 come right out of the parameters that are SMART metrics. So in a daily, hourly, I'm looking at these as early warning systems and making a decision where I need to focus and what I need to do. In a weekly, monthly trending or a quarterly trending, I'm making decisions on where and how I need to step up or invest. So if I don't have a DDOM, I don't have 2/3 of the information I need to be able to make good decisions and make future improvements. So no DD-S&OP and no adaptive S&OP. The recommendation for strategic projection actually requires a modeling team to interface with S&OP. So this is where DD-S&OP and strategic S&OP start to overlap. This is just to remind you that we've already identified these SMART metrics or flow-based metrics. And what we're talking about is the top 2 time frames. Those are your DDOM. So if you take a look at this, I'm actually showing you where these SMART metrics come into tactical reconciliation. And that's what's giving me the information to refresh those model parameters. I want to talk to you now about Thoughtware, because what we're going to show in our cases is how Thoughtware becomes critical. It's critical during the modeling, and modeling starts and continues and makes the health on your business. What it really does is it gives people the ability to observe and identify and resolve distortion or conflict to relevant information and materials at a systemic level. So it makes no sense for me to be looking at one resource, whether I got 3 minutes or 3.5 minutes on a standard route. The whole point of a time buffer is to take care of that variation. And what I'm looking at is where in the system am I blocked and not getting flow through. If I'm flowing at 3 and 3.5 minutes and flowing all the way through, I don't care. What I care is where did I get stuck, or what didn't I have that allowed me to follow the plan. Software's job is to provide a framework of visibility to relevant information. And that allows us to sustain and improve the DDOM performance. You've seen examples of DBR Plus and R Plus, and all that you have is incredibly flexible software built around the ability to follow the rules and make a model inside just about any framework for any kind of company that you can imagine. But it is that modeling and Thoughtware that drives that software to be effective. So the better an organization can see flow, the more adaptable and sustainable that organization is. So it's about that visibility to flow and where is it not happening, or where's my opportunity? Where is a resource that I'm not using that I could actually turn into something the market wants? So Thoughtware uses the DDOM framework to challenge assumptions between improvement alternatives and focus investment. And this becomes critical if parts of your organization are still hung up in focusing on improvement alternatives that are cost-driven, not flow-driven. So demand-driven is grounded in the theory of constraints. And if you know anything about us or where we came from, it really started out with the idea that Goldratt had about 5 steps. But if you look at it this way, the framework of the software is grounded in making certain that you identify and then you learn how to exploit. Exploit simply means that I make certain that that critical resource is identified, is protected with a buffer, is manned, and exploitation simply means I know how to get the very most out of it that I can. And then I understand what or how I impact it so that every person in the organization can see it and know what's their job to feed it, help it, make it work. In fact, metrics should be about everybody being on time to the buffer they feed. After I have that visibility, I can actually manage everything around those points. So it's managing a system through its leverage points and the interactions with each other. Modeling is important and visibility is important so I can see those interactions. So DD-S&OP provides strategic system focus, and the whole thing that managers have least of is time. And most companies have way too many projects in the works. They have so many projects in the works that you end up with, it's just like whip on the floor. Nothing gets done on time. There's also very little focus because everybody has a pet project. Also, focus is usually driven by a cost measure. And if you think back to the first webinar and we looked at the example from the China company and the earthenware company, you really saw why putting in a cost-based focus broke flow, broke the model. So projects need to be identified at a data-driven root cause system level and not a local symptom level. And that is the DDS&OP's modeling team's job. A root cause system level solution requires agreement and effort from many different resources across the organization. So that modeling team needs to have somebody from every area of the organization that's impacted or that impacts. Senior management needs to agree on project prioritization based on flow, impact, and market strategy. And that means we need to educate that top management tier so that they understand what they're looking at and that connection between flow and ROI. A successful project management requires project prioritization, and it has to be directed and shared by senior management to their direct reports. So this is this bi-directional that I've been talking about. It is my model management makes the recommendation to their senior managers. Their senior managers take that to the executive team. The executive team makes the decision to support it or not, and they prioritize the top projects. Senior management returns to their group and tells direct reports, you can work on your project, but when this project comes up and you're on it, when your part is on it, it comes first. You can't manage anything without a detailed project map. So think of this as the routing that you would have in manufacturing. This is a project map that is in prerequisite function, prerequisite order, and every functional team is required to implement. The project and the scope and the progress have to have visibility to the assigned task progression, which means you should be meeting weekly to see who's on board, what they've done, and what's blocking them, and how are you going to unblock them. Managers have to be held accountable for a timely completion of their assigned project tasks. Now, what I'm showing you is actually how we implement our DDOMs, but it's also how we teach our clients to use the information, build their projects, and then implement their project improvements. So I'm going to show you a case study from Stem Cell that was shared through the DDI conference that I did. And I guess I was in Frankfurt last fall. And I believe Stem Cell is out on DDI's website, but I don't think, in fact, I know that this is not going to appear anywhere but here. So this is Stem Cell, and this was their first step in becoming a DDAE. So once we got their DDOM up, we could take a look at the very first remodel. So the very first thing we do is we get you up, and then we work with you for that first month to see what's going on. Within the first 2 weeks, you can see what's not working and what is working, even if you have a 6-month representation. So here's a little background. Stem Cell's metrics are, they set a goal 4 years ago that they called it the drive to 95. They wanted to be 95% on time, 2-day shipment to their customers. Some of their products take 3 days, some of their products take 6 months to make. Everything they make, with the exception of maybe 3%, is a finished goods stock keeping item. So they implemented DDMRP and R Plus in 2017, and they moved from on-time delivery to 80% to 93%. And then they got stuck, and they couldn't get any better. And that comes back to me saying to you, you build a seawall with your product in DDMRP, and you put a wave barrier that is your finished good, your intermediate goods, and your make parts. But your ability to deal with supply variation, which is what you can control and actually improve on, does not come from DDMRP. It comes from demand-driven scheduling and execution, DBR. And in our world, that would be DBR+. So in April of 2018, we went live with DBR+. And what they were looking for was this side over here, Replenishment Plus. These are their model parameters, and they're looking at too much, too little. They ran some simulations for the last 6 months. We sized the buffers for capacity and we put in intermediate stock, resized the finished goods buffer based on this, and then we put in DBR+. And what we're looking at is too early, too late. And then we investigate further, we remodel the attributes, and we change those DDMRP buffer parameters. Okay. This update requires that we find all the lead time standards, work practices, and policies that are actually blocking us from getting better. And that starts from day one when you turn on your full DDOM. So supply side make parts is the only place in your supply chain where you have control to remove variation and improve system flow. So that's what this is about. And you really can't size your make parts if you don't understand your capacity. So when you put in a DDMRP system with make parts and you haven't got a good view on your knowing where your leverage point is, having a realistic schedule, and having a very good idea of what critical capacities are in short supply, you're not able to improve or even have that visibility. So this is a very simplified stem cell product flow. And what you can see is they take in raw materials, pick and stage. They have everything they do goes into glassware. They're actually growing cells in different size containers. This is where your scientists exist. This is the heart of growing these puppies. Then you have a QC ops sample, a QC media, a label, and it goes into an intermediate part, which comes back out and becomes a finished good, or it goes to a finished good, shipped to distribution, or shipped to the customer. All resources feed quality assurance. You're talking about things that are going for FDA approval, cancer research. Every single aspect has to have a quality assurance portion. So what I'm showing you is QA's released is the last step to close a work order, but every single item is sending a report to QA for its confirmation that it's completed what it needs. QA reviews checking can require rework at any of the preceding resources. So if I were to do this as it came to me, I could actually be sending these back and it could be worked concurrent as it's going down this line. But the truth is, QA doesn't have enough resources and all variation accumulates at QA. So they ended up batching and finishing everything at the end. And their cycle time variation was between 2 and 18 days. Now that variation means I don't know what work order is not going to be in compliance. So if I find something at the end of my batch and I batch that requires that I go clear back here and then ripple through, I can end up with that 18-day variation. The capacity stressed, which means they can't batch. They don't want to touch it multiple times. They can't do it in small batches, so they batch it to a big batch. QA batches work to review once after the last step in the routing. And the interesting thing about QA is this is the least skilled resource they have. They are really just reading reports and doing a checklist and then sending it back. They're not reconciling the problem. They're raising the problem. This is what I want you to note here is that they have a fiscal year that ends in September 30th. And this is the goal. They have a quality metric for every single area. And they put it into a green, yellow, red, which is pretty clever, which it says, if you're green 80 to 100%, I'm not going to worry about you. I'm going to focus on the people who are not in compliance with their target cycle days. The cycle day for QA is to be done in 7 days or 4 business days. That's their goal. Their result was 59% of hitting that 7-day mark. And that's what I just told you, a variation between 2 and 18 days. So if you look out, they had never been any better than about 65. Okay. So by using the DDOM, we can easily see what's the critical resource and who makes backlogs. Now, even though clean room and mixed media is the strategic drum, all the variation at QA is actually making it a capacity bottleneck. So I can know where I want my drum to be, which is where all my science is and all my expensive equipment, but it doesn't matter. Reality sets in and it tells you exactly what's leveraging your entire investment. So every finished goods product routes through QA, and all that variation has to go in to sizing those buffers. Remember, there are finished goods stock and a intermediate stock that goes into those finished goods. Every single one of those goes through QA. If I have multiple intermediate components going into a finished good, then I've got this rippling not just once, but 2 and 3 times. So all I'm doing is showing you those smart metrics that give us that information. So it's time for remodel and a Thoughtware. So this is their reality. They have to decide where to add headcount to improve flow. And they've been fighting about this for a very long time because stem cells grown 28% in 2018. So even from, from October until April when we went live, they were on a 28% trajectory. And they have been growing for 20% a year for 20 years. Tremendous growth pattern. So the dilemma has been for them, hire 4 people for QA or stay inside the headcount budget for QA. And the truth is, everybody wants headcount. Everybody's been requesting headcount. Everybody thinks they need more scientists. The reason why I want to hire 4 people for QA is I won't get it if I won't achieve my 95% market service level if I can't hire those 4 people. Down here, I want to stay on my stay inside my headcount budget in order to ensure that I can deliver my budget profit. And I need both my budget profit and my service level to maximize my return on investment. So when you're looking at a logical diagram of conflict, and if you're familiar with the theory of constraints thinking process, this is a great way for people to understand what's the difference between 2 alternatives and to check your assumptions. The assumptions are on this side is that the reason I have to add those 4 people is we have visibility to the capacity overload at QA. So I know how overloaded it is. This is data driven. We can explain the source and impact of variation on QA resource loading. We know that if I have to batch at the end, I'm going to ripple all the way through. If I could address QA as everybody reported to me, all of the fixing could be concurrent with the next resource's workload. If I reduce the cycle time at QA, it reduces the decoupled lead time of every make part. And a stock buffer reduction dwarfs the investment in labor. It's millions of dollars. On the other side, the assumption is I have to stay inside my headcount budget because we have a headcount freeze to protect our profit target. And if we increase QA, everyone else will want a headcount increase. Now, those may sound silly, but they're true. And I know that if you talk to anybody's company, they're going to be in the same boat. So the solution is we made our modeling team and our top management agree that we would use our capacity load graphs in conjunction with reason code analysis from the time buffers to target where to focus investment and deliver the business case in dollar savings. So let's just take a quick look at how we build that business case. So the stock model before the QA headcount increase, this is one SKU. This is an actual SKU of theirs. And I'm not going to explain to you how to do a DDMRP buffer. I'm going to assume you know. But the point to understand is there's a way to get a targeted average inventory. And that targeted average inventory is just good math. It's 130. If I improve my red zone safety, I drop the variation from 2 to 18 to inside my 7 days. And I use that reduced lead time from taking 11 days, go from 18 to 7 out of all of my buffers. Then I end up with a buffer configuration for all of my finished goods and intermediate parts that drops from here to here. On that part, it's about 50%, 130 to 69. Okay, that means variability dropped by 25% in terms of the red zone. I went from a 50 red zone to a 25. Lead time down 11 days. Total average inventory down 61. A 47% reduction in target inventory. And that's every SKU. So let's just take a look at what happened to QA when we did that, when we identified the first month. This is the first month. We got to 80%. We got to 81% simply by taking the variation out that was happening by having no choke. We hadn't added the people yet. We just didn't have a good choke and a good schedule. Getting a good schedule and a good choke got them here, okay? But look where they got after we added those people. They got 90, 91, 93, and they hit 90, 95 over the last 2 months. But what's really important is the company's been on time at 95%, and they're doing it with way less inventory than they did at 93% because they finished their demand-driven operating model, and it could actually address supply variation. Let's take a look at another case, and this is a demand-driven challenge to deliver the market strategy. DDOM and is the key to DDS&OP and tactics and improvement. So this is the background for wall clippers. So they needed to move from a cost strategy to a flow strategy, and that's pretty tough. But their DDOM is up, and we're taking a look at how to remodel because we have some serious capacity issues, and we can't fill some buffers. They have some clients who will actually charge them a penalty if they don't ship on time. So the past metric, this is a value stream setup that they're broken into different types of products, global, animal, let's see, family products, professional products. So the past metric for value stream and brand managers was product profitability. Both of them were measured on the product profitability of their brand. So a value stream is divided into a brand. And of course, product profitability takes into account standard unit cost and product margin. So brand managers were constantly seeking cost reductions that improve their product margin. One of the cost lean strategy decisions was to mold the product number into the case and avoid a separate step, take out a labor action, to stamp the case with the end product code. So they're actually making a mold for every product by product number. That means they change the injection molder. They have to change the mold every time they mold that product case. Product codes differentiate the country and or the customer product SKU, and different countries have different country codes, and more importantly, they have different power codes and batteries in the product kit. And those are not placed until the end of the product is made and they're packaged. So at the end, a clipper is matched with its power cord and its batteries, and it's packaged. The battery and the power cord is the single most expensive purchase part in the product. The result of this strategy was the end item SKU was differentiated at a molding, which is the first step in the routing, and it flattened the BOM. So all the processes were coupled to the value stream assembly lines. So they were going for one piece flow across those assembly lines. The product stamp resulted in a unit cost savings and was implemented across all value stream product lines as part of their lean cost strategy. Molds were purchased and molding machines dedicated to each of the value stream product lines. The market service level is 98%. That's the strategy. And the buffer profiles have been built to that target. Problem is, we don't have enough capacity to get to those buffer targets and deliver that 98% on time in a 2-day lead time. That's their market strategy. So when we built the model, we sized the buffers to do that. So let's just take a look at what that flow looks like, the model, and let's reconcile what actually happens against what could happen. So what you have is a 2-day market strategy tolerance, and you want to be 98%. There are no intermediate buffers. I start by molding, and I have 12 case variations. Then I go through case assembly, and this is just one value stream, one of 5. Then I have 12 case assembly variations, and I end up with 52 finished good variations, and I ship out of this finished goods warehouse. Okay. This is our drum. It doesn't have enough capacity, and we have actually tied it to that value stream. So given the current state of molding and assembly capacity and this 13-day R+ lead time, it's going to require an increase of $2 million into the finished goods that already exist out here, or what they had. They would have to increase it by $2 million, and they don't have the molding capacity to do it. Remember, this is a true bottleneck. So we did a deep dive on the profiles of these 52. And what I want to show you is this is pretty smooth, but I have spikes. This is erratic and lumpy. This is less smooth and a little lumpy. And what I'm showing you is this is just examples of everything that goes into that 52. And because I have moved it to an end item finished good, each one of these has to be sized in its own demand pattern. Now, if I could find a way to put an intermediate component in at a place where I could I could lump up all of those together and have a really lovely demand pattern. So here was the plan. if I took an R plus lead time and I insert into the level of the BOM a non-molded, a non-stamped molding case, I would be able to take those 12 items and reduce them to 3. And from those 3, I could laser and pack. I could laser in the number I need on the case and put the correct battery and the correct cord in, add 1 day, and have my finished goods out here be very, very small compared to what they were. 2 days versus 13 days. It would also require that I put in a case assembly, and that would be a 3-day lead time. So basically, I would have my molded parts, then I would assemble them into a clipper, then I would pull that clipper out and I would laser the clipper and pack it into the box and put in the right cord, and then it would go out to here and I would ship from that warehouse. So what I end up with is 2 alternatives: assemble to forecast or replenish to pull. If I assemble to forecast, I had 15 finished goods, 52 finished goods, 11 case assemblies, and 12 cases. Down here, I'm 2 cases, 3 case assemblies, 3 bulk items, which is my new intermediate, and 52 finished goods. And look what I've done is I've broken those lead times, those R plus lead times, into what is going to be the math to make those buffers. So the current target inventory plus an additional $2 million, or a business case that says I only need a total target inventory out here of 600,000 versus what I already had plus an additional 2. And I know that my cost to do that, my cost cash out, is $30,000 for a laser printer, and I need 2 of them. So by consolidating that variation, this is what I'm getting at those 3 cases. I can consolidate this. It's a very nice, easy thing to make a SKU out of. So demand-driven project business case analysis. Add 2 layers to the BOM, heresy. Invest in 2 laser printers and add 2 people at pack and kit. Then move the laser and packing from the value stream lane to the intermediate finished goods warehouse. So the bad news is my unit cost is going to go up because yes, I am going to add 2 people and a resource center. And the good news is my 98% service level is pretty well guaranteed. And my molding capacity is in the green, which means I don't have to buy any molders. And my inventory went down by millions of dollars. So this was a pilot and it was a test. And it went so well that they decided they were going to take it to all the other value streams. So take a look at what they built. What they're saying is if they were to take their molding, and this is plating, which is they're actually putting in the blade. They're going to burn the laser into the case. They're going to put the blades in. They're going to plate those blades, and then they're going to build and pack. Okay. So these are purchase plugs. These are 20 SKUs. And at the end of that, I put them into a warehouse and ship. What you want to see down here is that the symbol that's used to identify these, this is currently buffered in R+. So today they had 21 international SKUs, and they could actually group those into 7 families based on a common build. Okay, and those colors show what those are going to be. So this was their proposal. Current state, we build and pack all our international dealers simultaneously. The result is 20 international SKUs, and they're being pulled from 6 families. Proposed future state, bulk, build the bulk, blank data inserts, bulk plated parts, and transformers without plugs. So they're going from each of those dedicated to bulk. The result, a reduction to 5 family variations from all of these SKUs. When all identified opportunities have been accomplished, there will be 20 international SKUs that can be grouped into just 2 families opposed to the current 7. So the first took them from 20 to 7, and then by looking at it even further, they could go from 7 to 2. Okay. Current state that they got to from 20 to 7 when they put in DDMRP. Future state, which is now their current state, they got from 7 to 2. So going to DDMRP, we got here. And DDOM we got here. Going to the next state using good demand-driven S&OP and project focus, we went to 2. Okay. So the identified opportunities were quantified, the dollars were put out there, and each one of these had a huge savings. Potential gains, easier product data management. If I did that, every single one of those had to have its own SKU. I had all that tooling to maintain and find. Better alignment of the build plan to actual customer. I'm doing a pull to a pull to a pull with even smaller units, but better yet, I've taken all the demand variation from this 21 and I've consolidated it into 2. Just that alone makes a huge difference in the amount of inventory I need to hold to be able to cover the market. I also got a huge bang for the buck in operations because I unleashed a tremendous amount of capacity. All those changeovers, the bulk build, the reduced variation, the one-piece flow and inspection. You add this all up, and the expected gain from reduced changeovers is about 90 man-hours per year on a line. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot, but this is a company that was planning on putting in new lines. They can make what they need with the existing line and actually develop some sprint capacity. Okay? Huge reduction in space when I take those inventory values down. So the whole point here is your DD&OP team, its job is to hunt down those outliers, get rid of the not enough and too late and the too much and too early, and come up with decreasing and decreasing variation, which allows me to shrink my buffers again and again and again. Every time I do that, I have a competitive weapon that makes it almost impossible to follow me because you can't do it without a DDOM. So what does your competition have to invest to match your market service? They have to invest, just as these people are going down the road, a lot more capacity because they don't have any visibility in how to get out of this mess that they're in. So that is a little thing from Wall. We'll be doing some cases in the future on how to use your DD&OP and integrating those in APM. We'll be doing some webinars sometime this next year, and we'll have cases from these people. So I'm going to open it up for questions, and I don't know, Sean, are you there?
Yeah, Brad's here, Deb.
Hi, Brad.
Actually, we do not have any questions from today's call yet, unless anybody submits one here in the next few seconds. You must have just covered it that well. Nobody had any questions from today's webinar. As Deborah mentioned, we will be holding a series of webinars on the demand-driven S&OP model, and Deborah will be taking us through that in early 2019, so details on that will be coming out soon. And since there's no questions, I think we'll just go ahead and wrap up.
Well, doggone, I made it shorter today so that I'd have time for questions because I seem to have been always on the edge of my time. So I just want to say to people that if you do have questions, please email me. I've had a couple of conversations with people. I will answer any email that I get, so I'll take the time. Sometimes I travel a lot, so I may be a little bit latent, but I absolutely will get back to you. So thanks so much for your time today. Thanks, Brad, and have a Merry Christmas all, or a Happy Holiday, and however you celebrate.